Was there a moment where you stepped away from Lenny, knowing you were not going to come back, except maybe for some ADR? But was there that moment for you?
Yeah, there's no ADR in this movie. Yeah, there's none. There's a couple things that Carrie did on her iPhone, and that's it. Or, yeah. But maybe that's where I couldn't understand what they were saying. I was like, I don't know. But Clint was great with that. He hazed. No, they can't understand it. Fuck them. That was like, great, Clint, great.
Please welcome to the stage moderator and producer of the film, Steven Spielberg, and director, co-writer, producer, and the star of Maestro, Bradley Cooper.
Well, I can guarantee you right now that Leonard Bernstein is here with us, giving you a big kiss on the mouth, squeezing your butt, and saying thank you for what you did for me, what you did for Felicia, what you did for Alexander, Nina, and Jamie, and everybody who loves the classical influence on all modern music. Traced all the way back through Bernstein and Mahler, everybody before that. This was a mitzvah. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
What's astonishing, and I'm taking myself out of my producer role totally here, because I sort of do have a sort of more of an insightful, inside perspective, but I'm just going to sit here to ask the questions that have been asked of me about you and the film and your process. And one of the things that really astonishes me, Bradley, is that when you first showed me A Star is Born, and of course I think we've all seen 4 Star is Borns before this one. What blew me away was I had never seen any Star is Born like the one you made, and I could not possibly believe that was your first directed motion picture. And I am triply knocked out by the fact that Maestro is only your second motion picture. That just is incredible. I'd like to first talk about the fact, because this story, the process of getting this film launched, has had a long history, starting with Marty Scorsese, who hired Josh Singer, and then Marty decided to do Irishman, and then I really wanted to tell the story, but I was also getting ready for West Side Story, and worked with Josh, and then, I was not going to be able to do it, and then, I called you, and you got the script, and you told me a story about what it was like growing up in your household with conducting as a little boy. Can you talk a bit about how young you were when you started conducting?
Sure. Whoa. Hey. Well, first of all, I have to say the only reason I'm here is this man right here. He gave me the opportunity. Truthfully, You know, when you're in a position that Steven's in, and you have the kind of heart that he has, you can change people's lives. And that's what he did to this person right here, by just extending his hand and saying, come with me, and here you go, and I'm going to let you tell this story the way that you and Josh will investigate it and explore it, and I'll be there to help guide you. So I'm completely indebted to you. Thank you, Stephen. Stephen and I, we go back. I mean, we were going to do American Sniper together. We were talking about doing Mad Helm together,
right.
and I shared with him my obsession with conducting, and I think that's how this started.
You did.
And when I was 8 years old, I asked Santa Claus for a baton, and Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny, and I just loved the power of the illusion of making music with your hand and gestures. And you would remember that. And so I was on vacation. You said, I might do this Bernstein thing, have a read. And then that's how it started. And then, of course, you also know how sort of what a maniac am when I love something. And how many texts did I send you like an hour after you sent me the script? And it was almost embarrassing.
Yeah, the text went on for 7 months. At least 7 months. and the texts were... They were brilliant, but what was happening in all the text messaging that you were sending me, and as you were also talking to Josh through the process, was the fact that what I probably would have done with this, and I think what Marty was thinking of doing with this, was a Leonard Bernstein biographical motion picture. And this is not a biographical Leonard Bernstein story. This is an anatomy of a marriage, and also an anatomy of looking into yourself. How do you represent yourself to yourself and to the world, even though you and Felicia and your family eventually knew exactly who Leonard Bernstein was. So this became a story about a marriage. What was it that made you, because I saw the evolution the script took, and when you and Josh began working, it went deeply into that relationship, almost exclusively.
Yeah, I mean, it really came down to Leonard being such a photographed and videoed musician, probably the most in the 20th century. He was sort of the dawn of all the technological advances that were occurring, and he had an incredible manager that was always at the forefront. So right away, when I started doing research with Josh, it became clear that there was no reason to ever make a sort of standard biopic, because there was just so much. I would just be doing some sort of impersonation of what's already out there. What was interesting, more than interesting, intoxicating, was this marriage, this relationship that we were unearthing between Felicia Montalegre, played so wonderfully by Carey Mulligan, and Leonard Bernstein, and that's the key. The things that I always love about movies are when I'm watching these sort of cinematical, mythological archetypes, yet I'm relating to them. And that's the goal. And I always knew that we had something nuclear with Leonard Bernstein's music. But what is there that we could tell, that we could explore, that's something that you all can connect to? And then it's healing. And then to me, it was this relationship. And when Josh and I found that as the North Star, that as the anchor, then everything started to really take form and take shape and get very exciting.
What was the 2-week retreat that you and Carey Mulligan went on to sort of vertically integrate yourself into these characters? The process?
Yeah, that was something that was taught to me in grad school by Elizabeth Kemp, who was taught by Sandra Seacath, and it was based in a dream workshop where you sort of chronicle your dreams, you log your dreams for a series of weeks, and then you get together with whoever else you're working with, and in this case it was Carey and I, and her acting teacher, Kim. And we worked for 6 days, and you share these dreams that you write down based on asking for your character. And then you do exercises together, and it culminates into a ritual that you create, sort of a one-person show for the other person. And it's really, the goal is just becoming absolutely vulnerable with the other person, so that you share something and you have a bond that you can really trust each other. And I've done this before with many projects. Stephanie, Lady Gaga, and I did it for A Star Is Born. Yeah, and it's amazing the things that come out of it, even when as a writer, that us sitting back to back came out of the ritual, And it was such an image that when we found ourselves in that position that I went back and Josh and I wrote that into the script. But that really is the moment, that exercise I find to be completely invaluable, because you just, once you're locked in that kind of way, we were able to be bold every day on set.
The other, pursuant to that, when you're working and you're working with your actors, how do you actually handle, being a member of the team but also being the coach? Because you're working both sides of the camera, and yet you were still Leonard Bernstein when you were directing Maestro, but you work both sides of the camera, and I was on the set a little bit, not a lot, and I was watching you, and it was amazing to see you go back and forth like that, still in character, but at the same time, out of the syntax of vernacular of the period dialogue and directly into the craft of letting Mango know how to push the dolly and talking to Lamatique and your DP. And so it was really interesting. How do you really, and there's a lot of actors, these days, not these days, but there have been actors that really distinguish themselves by being in front of the camera and behind the camera. How did you find that? You've done 2 in a row like that now.
I think because, Steve, I always found myself thinking like a filmmaker as an actor for so many years, and always being fascinated by that my brain, I think I just found a place where my brain feels the most comfortable. So it didn't feel like I was sort of doing some sort of oddly schizophrenic, he does say that in the movie, but like it's this sort of schizophrenic gesture, going back and forth between directing and acting. It felt like one fluid thing. And Steven's right that it was, I would show up to work maybe 5 to 6 hours before crew call to become Lenny with Kazuhiro, who was incredible, the makeup artist. We worked years on that. Yeah, he was unbelievable. And so then Lenny's there, and then when you came on set, it was actually kind of wonderful to talk to Steven Spielberg as Leonard Bernstein. It was kind of great. And Steven was even there when we did a wonderful test back in 2019 at Disney Hall to make sure I didn't look like a Saturday Night Live skit. I was really out of fear, and you were there. And we have some wonderful photographs.
Yeah, I have a big photo hanging in my office with Leonard Bernstein and myself. I'm wearing a COVID mask. Leonard Bernstein is not wearing the mask. And we're next to each other, and we're both looking at something on my iPhone. Yeah. And seeing Leonard Bernstein with an iPhone is very disconcerting, let me tell you. But it's up on my wall in Tribeca right now.
So the short answer is, or the long answer is, it feels natural, but I think from the outside maybe it looks odd, but just staying in the voice is only because it's easier. I can't even imagine having to break out of that melodic tone and musical sort of way that he was. It's just, that's why I spent so many years working on the character, so that he was banked, so I never had to even think about him. He's just there. All I have to do is take a leap of faith. And that really is the key, I think, as a director, in terms of directing and acting in the movies that you're in, because the other actors, when they come on set, see how willing I am to fail by literally, talking like this to everybody in the set. I mean, it's crazy. And I think it gave them license to also be willing to jump off that cliff. And if I wasn't actually doing it myself, I would try to be, I'd have to talk people into it rather than just doing it by example.
Talk a little bit about Tim Monick, who, I would listen, you would send me some of your sessions where Bradley would basically do a 15 to 20 minute improvisation. And Tim and Bradley were working on the vocalization of Lenny. Can you talk about
we started, when Steven even broached the conversation of me potentially doing this movie, I immediately started to work on the voice with Tim Monick, who I met through Leonardo DiCaprio, who had worked with him for years. Had suggested I work with him on American Sniper. That was the first movie I worked with him on. And he's just unbelievable. And we did A Star Is Born and Nightmare Alley. And then we started working on Leonard Bernstein's voices, really, because he has this young voice at 25, and then it goes down about an octave as he gets older through his emphysema and smoking and all.
And it also gets a little bit nasal, too.
Well, he has a deviated septum, that Lenny had. And so that was we started in 2018, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. He moved to New York, and we did that all the time. And that's the only way, because it was just, that was the thing that was most terrifying, learning how to conduct and to be able to become Lenny. So I just spent as much time as possible and getting the prosthetic right.
You know, one of the most audacious things for me about the risks you took in directing Maestro, and I wouldn't call it a risk because you did it with such confidence and you never looked back once you made a commitment. But were scenes with no coverage. The scene, the complete explosive and powerful scene between Felicia and Lenny in the apartment before Snoopy goes by the windows, you know, which is an amazing coda for that scene. You didn't even cover that. There weren't over shoulders, there weren't close-ups. That was it. You did it multiple takes. Talk a little bit about some of your choices where you decided you had a concept shot, and you wanted not to change your mind later in the editing room, but you just went ahead and shot it without any safety net.
It was the first movie I've made fearlessly, for sure. There were only 2 scenes that I shot with fear, and it was the first day of shooting, which was when he teaches young William. I did a bunch of setups, but really all I ever had envisioned was this sort of, he's like a Muppet in the bottom of the frame, and he can't help himself. And by the end, he's taking over the whole movie, which is what you see in the film. When he says, you know, oh, is it for me or for you, you know? And then the other thing was the Ely Cathedral when he's conducting Mahler. I had done like Brian De Palma High and a cable cam and all this stuff out of fear, when really it's just one shot that reveals her because she's there to see him not have hate in his heart. Other than that, I did do what you said, Stephen, and I think it's just for the sheer reason that I had spent so much time, and Josh and I had spent so much time writing and working on this movie and creating in my mind every single possible avenue to shoot it and way of shooting it, so that by the time we got on set, it was so clear to me how I saw the movie. And if I made a pivot, I could then see the effects that I would have to do. So for example, the fight scene, and Chrissy McCosco, who we produced this with, you know, because she really helped me have the confidence not to do coverage of that on that day, because that was the 3rd take, and Carrie and I both knew we got it. But it was like, Jesus, do we really not do any coverage? And she said, no, don't do it, because the whole point was that's a wide shot, and then we get there bearing witness after in the movie, which is him at his Thursday rehearsal, where he can't even face us as he's declaring what he thinks is his truth, and then turns around and he's like a pirate from Penzance with a beard. And then for her, it's still in this Victorian cage at the Palm Court, bearing actually her truth finally to Shirley about what hit the cost of her love for him. And so it always there couldn't then be coverage of close-ups before that. It's not how I created the movie in my mind, how I wanted to execute it. And also that came from me as a child watching my parents fight. I never was in between them. I was always with my sister at a distance. And that's the feeling I wanted to create. And many moments in this movie when they're also having a conversation by the pool, and we're far away, almost like we're not supposed to be listening to this, but we can't stop it. What's going on? And I don't feel safe. That's how I felt when I was a kid, and so I wanted us to feel like that as an audience. And also, there's a joke, there's a punchline, and you can't go into the close-ups, come back to the wide and have Snoopy pass and have that be funny. So there were a couple different reasons. But yes, and again, that is a testament to Carey Mulligan, able to, run and drive that scene. And I could be so cinematically bold because I had an actor who was just incredibly gifted.
And also the distance between them, by not cutting, by not having coverage. Otherwise, you wouldn't see how far apart they were.
Well, yeah, that's the other beauty, is you get to have fun, because he just comes in the frame and he's dying to leave that frame, but he wants that drink, so he's going to come in and get the drink and then go back.
There was no digital work at all in this movie. Bradley Cooper did all the conducting. That was Bradley conducting.
Woo!
Completely, 100%. And I just love you to talk a little bit about that, because it was astonishing. When I went and saw you, I was there with, Gustavo Dudamel was there, Christy was there, Paul Thomas Anderson was there.
This is for when we were testing.
At Disney Hall, it was just a test. but you were doing Mahler.
Yeah.
And you were conducting Mahler, and I was taking my cell phones, I was taking some stills, but that was at the beginning of your, I guess, teaching yourself how to conduct. Tell everybody who was helping you do some of the training for the conducting.
Yeah, well that was, when we did that, it was just to see, is it believable? But it was still fake conducting. I was just doing what I had done when I was a kid. But then it was working with Gustavo Dudamel. He actually performed that Mahler's Second Symphony, The Resurrection, with the LA Philharmonic at the Hollywood Bowl, and I was there with him for the full 2 weeks from the first rehearsal to the last performance. And then I went with him to Berlin, where he did it again with the Berlin Philharmonic, and we were in Berlin together for 2 weeks. And then I just spent, the New York Philharmonic opened their doors to me, and I would go there 4 nights a week for 3.5 years after I put my daughter to bed and just stay and watch. I had a seat where I could see the conductor, and then just studied. And there's actually that Mahler piece, which we always knew early on we wanted to do, and that's live with the London Symphony Orchestra at the Ely Cathedral, which is where he did it in the 70s. So it was really incredible. And I kept messing it up. That was a 2-day shoot. The first day I fucked up the whole thing. And it was only one time, but I shot it out of fear. And then when I actually didn't, and I set up a shot fearlessly, it was the only time I didn't mess up and I actually conducted them, which is odd. Lenny saying, just listen to me, Bradley. So, and it really was Yannick's, also the head of the Philadelphia Orchestra and the Met Opera, was there all the time. I had an earpiece, he was counting time in my ear, even though I couldn't hear it because it was so loud. And he had made a video of just so that I would study for all the time changes. And there's actual footage of Leonard Bernstein that you can watch on YouTube of that recording. So I was able to study that. And I just did that for years, Stephen, just trying to get enough knowledge to be able to conduct those 6 minutes and 23 seconds of music live for real, because I knew that we had to do that. I learned that on A Star Is Born. If we could record the vocals live, there's just no substitute. You can feel it, as I would argue you could feel that tonight watching him conduct the orchestra.
And the orchestra, you're a wonderful observer, and in working with you on a couple films that we didn't go through all the way with, when I didn't do American Sniper, Clint stepped in and made one of the best films of his career with you, and you were incredible as the character. But you've worked with some pretty amazing directors: Clint Eastwood, Guillermo del Toro, David O. Russell. You worked with Guillermo, who is it? Paul Thomas Anderson, of course. When you're working with directors and you're on the set, can you compartmentalize what you do as an actor and then at the same time watch their craft and observe why they're doing a shot and what the composition of that shot is? And do you get into their heads in that sense?
I mean, I'm probably a real pain in the ass. You'd have to ask them. Jeez. But what I will say is my experience, I felt like I went to film school with David O. Russell. You'd have to ask them, but I feel like they saw in me very early on, because I was able to get in editing rooms of all of those directors for months, for like the entire film. And I always had actor friends say, how the heck did that happen? And I said, I think it's because they knew that I didn't care about what I was doing. I cared about helping them make the movie they want to make. So that was very clear to all of those filmmakers very early on. And you and I know Clint very well. And for Clint to do that is kind of unheard of, absolutely unheard of. But he really realized early on, like, oh, this guy he's with me, and we have the same goal. And for me as a filmmaker, if there's someone who has the same goal, I'm like, yes, please, tell me all of your thoughts, if we're on the same page. And so I think that I just was able to learn so much from all of these filmmakers because they opened their doors to me creatively and allowed me to walk down the road with them to a large degree, because they knew, yes, when I was on set, first of all, I never leave set, ever, so I'm always there. Because I'm fascinated, I love it. I was like that on Alias, this television show with JJ, I never left. I had no life, but I also never left. I didn't know anybody in LA, so I stayed all the time.
talk a bit about your crew. You know,
Yes.
Your AD, your UPM. You know, your whole team at the DGA, and talk a bit about Matty and how you worked with him, and was there any template or other movies that really influenced you and gave you ideas about Maestro?
That's a really, it's a very interesting question. I thought of Ernst Lubitsch and Max Ophuls with the black and white, but anything other than just how I remember that time period cinematically. I would almost be making it up if I said that there were specific things. I remember Stars Born, Hal Ashby was like in my head. But it really becomes its own thing based on, I just love movies so much that it's just sort of inside of me. You know what I mean? I can't even, it would be hard to parse it all out. It's all one thing that is who I am. It's like my whole entire existence.
A lot of movies.
But that's what I'm saying. It's almost based on, I'm basically a composite of movies. Because I just grew up on movies, and television. So it's hard for me to sort of pin it to one thing, but certainly everything, the way I visualize everything is based on life experience and films that I've seen. In terms of the crew, because I've been an actor for so many years, I've been able to observe wonderful crew members, and I was just lucky enough to get who I feel are the best. Scott Sakamoto, A camera, is incredible, and Colin Anderson was B camera. I mean, that combination, I kept taking photos of them both with the Steadicam on, because that to me was like, the greatest, camera operation in the world together in the same movie. Mango to me is the best dolly grip in the world. Matty Lebatique, the heavens blessed me when he decided to do A Star Is Born. Tracy line producer was amazing, incredible producers, Steven Spielberg and Christy McCosco. Everybody was great. And I have to say Netflix. There's only one place that made this movie, and it was them. No one else would make this movie, period. They were like, a movie that's half black and white, 1:3:3 aspect ratio, with a 6-minute scene of a guy conducting classical music. No way. But Scott Stuber, he said yes, and he trusted me, and that's the only reason we're both here for this movie is because of them.
No, I think we owe a lot to Scott to cure
And to Kira Goldberg.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk a bit about this sound design.
Oh, I was just going to say, and Steve Morrow, the sound design.
Sound design, yeah.
Incredible.
Because the sound design on this, you got to see it in the greatest circumstances on IMAX.
Yeah.
And the sound design is extraordinary.
So I remember seeing the Jason Reitman movie about Gary Hart that Hugh Jackman did, and there were these scenes in the room and I called Steve Morrow, who was the sound mixer, and said, "How did you guys do that?" Because it really felt like it was overlapping dialogue and that the extras weren't, mouthing. And he said, "Yeah, I mic everybody and I mix it in real time so that you can have something that you can listen to while you're editing." And I was like, "Well, that's it," because there's nothing that an actor hates more than when you're doing it. You just wait for them to say it and then say, you're like, "Okay, but that's not how that's not life, but okay." And then you start to get not free. So we did that for all of those things, and because I knew that, having done A Star Is Born that way, it really freed Josh Singer and I up to write dialogue that we knew would be able to have that kind of melody, the melody that these people spoke. Part of what we loved about making a movie about these two is just the music that they made speaking together. So Steve Morrow and his team were able to allow us this sonic flexibility that was just invaluable. And then in the mixing of the movie, which I'd worked with Tom O'Sanage and Dean on A Star Is Born, and American Sniper, I'd worked with Tom. We started talking about this movie while we were mixing A Star Is Born, because that's when Steven had come to me with Maestro, and we started talking about how, and I said, well, we're going to have to shoot the music live. So and Jason Ruder, just what that entailed, having to mic Ely Cathedral so that we could get the sound that you saw with recording it live was just a monster, a mammoth undertaking that took years to plan.
And I have to go back to the camera one more time. That amazing shot, the sustained shot. There's a little coverage at the beginning of Ely Cathedral, but the sustained shot that goes through your complete transcendental bliss, and it goes past you, and it goes wide again, And we don't know where we're going at the very, very end. We get to see Felicia's blue gown from behind.
Yeah, it's one reveal.
And it's one
big
reveal that she's there. So at the climax of that incredible piece of musical composition, there also is the resolution in that relationship. She's back and she's with you. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, and that all came out of, as I was saying earlier, that first day for that scene, I had like 3 setups, a huge cable cam that we spent like a year preparing, all out of fear that I thought, well, if I mess it up, I can cut around it. And I did mess up, and I woke up the next morning and I said, I can't do that. And there was a techno crane sitting outside because we were going to do the exterior shot that night. And we wheeled it into the cathedral. I asked everybody to wait, the 175 orchestra members and chorus and extras, and with Mango and Scott Sakamoto and Maddie and the local crew there in London who were incredible operating the techno crane. I had my iPhone and the 6 minutes, and we were just walking through, and I had someone with a bow to make sure I could navigate that shot, which was on the 27 lens, and it's one shot then ends on coming over her right shoulder. And we just did one take of that, and that's what's in the movie, and it worked, and it was everybody working together, and it was just, I mean, I'll never forget it. That was the hardest and most exhilarating thing I've ever done in my life. Yeah, and to see it on IMAX must have been cool.
Did you get your heart broken while you were making this movie at any point?
No, I think my heart was so full because of him. It was unbreakable.
Did you ever? I mean, because it was a fluid production. Because you would text me and you would say, "I've got this idea for a scene," or you talk to Jamie, or you get more information about the personal lives of the kids, and there was so much really creative. I would just say deepening of the story of the characters as you were in process. So you never really had a lock script from the beginning. Don't you feel that it was a fluid production that way?
I mean, my experience, the best films I've been a part of is it's alive until your shoulders relax right before you realize you're going to deliver the print master. I mean, I had that editing bay open right up until then.
What was it like? Because I've gone through this with Daniel Day-Lewis on Lincoln, and I don't know what it was like for me when on the last shot, which was after Lincoln was, now he's for the ages. His death scene was the last thing we shot, and I had listened to Daniel as Lincoln for over a year when he was preparing, and I know when he asked to see me, I came into his trailer and he was talking with his English accent. And it killed me. I just broke down. I was not prepared for that. Was there a moment where you stepped away from Lenny, knowing you were not going to come back, except maybe for some ADR? But was there that moment for you?
Yeah, there's no ADR in this movie. Yeah, there's none. There's a couple things that Carrie did on her iPhone, and that's it. I'm not a fan of ADR. Yeah. But maybe that's why I couldn't understand what they were saying. I was like, yep. I don't know. But Clint was great with that. He hates. No, they can't understand it. Fuck them. I was like, great, Clint, great. It's funny, Stephen. I wore Chris Kyle's shoes. I was just showing Stephen Chris Kyle's
the kids.
The kids. They just went to see Maestro tonight in Texas. Which was awesome. Chris Kyle was the guy that I played, and his family went to see the movie tonight in Texas. I wore the shoes that we made based on Chris's shoes for about 6 months. I couldn't take them off. I don't know why. It just sort of happened. I remember Lawrence Fishburne coming to our school, talking about how he wore his camouflage fatigues for a whole school year after he came back from the Philippines in Apocalypse Now. He wore it to school. This one, you'd have to ask people close to me. I think I was speaking with that sort of melody. I mean, Josh could probably tell you. That stopped maybe just a couple months ago. Because it was infectious the way that he spoke, It really was very intoxicating. Yeah.
When you get a chance, if you just YouTube some of the young people's concerts, it's amazing what he did for classical music, where he popularized classical music.
15 seasons, yeah. I mean, this movie does anything. Spotify, Bernstein, and Mahler, and rethink what it is to be married.
Well, listen, on that, they're giving me the wave off here. This has been an extraordinary road that you've traveled. I am so happy and I feel real good about myself that I hired you. And I'm so proud of you for once I hired you for taking over and becoming everything that gave all of us the experience that we've had tonight. Thank you, Bradley.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Hangover 4.
Thank you.
Love you, Steven!